Perfect. So we'll go ahead and just give it a few minutes for everyone to just sort of trickle in. But as people do trickle in, how are you today? Like in this moment in your body, how do you feel today in your body?
I'm actually feeling really well. Thank you so much. I feel pretty good today. And I'm in Michigan and it's rainy and cold. So sometimes that can make you not feel as well, but I'm doing okay. Yesterday I was having a little bit of nerve pain, but I'm doing well. Thank you so much. And thank you for putting these webinars on. This is so important, so important. So thank you.
Oh yeah, no, especially I know with Endo, there can be, with women's health in general, I mean, I feel like women's healthcare issues have been historically brushed off and pushed to the sidelines, especially with Endo as well, because I think a lot of even our OBs and our medical doctors, unfortunately, just are not trained on how to look at these symptoms, because it's a wide range of symptoms and not everyone has the same ones. And it's not just painful periods. Like I think that's what, even before myself, you know, I was ignorant on this issue before I started working for this foundation here. And I just thought it was painful periods, but I've learned over the past few months and stuff that it's not. It could be incontinence, which you wouldn't think that would be something with Endo.
Yeah, it could be. I mean, I have people that I know that their lungs have collapsed from endometriosis. I mean, it's a whole system disease. It's just like you said, there's just a lack of awareness of what it is.
Yeah. So that's why these webinars and stuff in your podcast is super important, because it sort of gives people the ability to get connected with individuals that are diagnosed with Endo, that are going through the same things, or if you know they have family and friends, are able to sort of point them through different resources. So yes, yeah, so thank you for what you do as well.
Oh, I appreciate that. Thank you so much for saying that. It means a lot to me.
So I guess when people are trickling in, since it is spooky season, any Halloween plans?
I actually am going to a NFL football game. I'm going to see the Detroit Lions. I do not have a costume planned, but I will be going to the Lions game and then passing out candy. So that's about it. That's all that's going on around here.
I mean, Detroit Lions and candy sounds like a good Halloween time to me.
Yeah, it'll be fun. It'll be fun. Are you dressing up as anything?
No, but historically I always say no, and then something comes up and I end up doing it. Yeah. But granted, I'm in Southern California, so for us over here, it's Halloween, but literally yesterday was 90 degrees, so it doesn't feel like Halloween.
Yeah, for sure.
And I'd much rather have the sort of gloomy, rainy weather you're having in Michigan.
I'll trade you. Oh, that's funny.
So I guess we'll just start now. So looking back, I would say, knowing what you know now, so you've been formally diagnosed with Endo. Looking back though, were there signs and symptoms in the beginning sort of your period that maybe gave you, looking back, big hindsight being 2020, that you can say, you know what, those were signs and symptoms that I had back in the day?
100%. I mean, I would say from the moment that I started my cycle, it was painful. I thought it was completely normal. I was told it was normal from, you know, my grandmother, friends, family, like you're just one of those people who has extremely painful periods and deal with it. And I think I want to say I was going into 7th grade when I started my cycle, and it was painful, but it got worse as the years went on into high school. But looking back, I thought it was totally normal, and I just dealt with it. And I didn't talk about it to anybody.
Yeah, and I was wondering, because with any chronic pain, I think we sort of normalize it and internalize it and think we sort of rationalize it. And I think with Endo, that tends to be the thing. Women that I've talked to tend to do the same exact thing.
Yeah, I mean, when you think something is normal, but you think everybody behind closed doors is laying on the floor with a heating pad or laying around the toilet during the time of their period. I honestly thought that, like, maybe I had it a little bit worse than other people, but I really thought that everybody, that was happening to them, and no one talked about it.
Was there like this light bulb moment for you where you sort of realize like, you know what, maybe this isn't normal for me to be going through?
A few times stand out when that happened. I do recall I was invited to go on a boat. I talk about this story often in high school. And of course I was on my cycle, and that's like the worst because you know you're going to go swimming or whatever. And I didn't use tampons because they hurt. And I never talked about that with anybody or anything like that. And all of my friends were like, come on, let's go on the boat. And I was like, I'm like, I don't want to, like, I just, you know, and I think I ended up talking to one of my friends and just being like, you know, I don't really use tampons. She's like, they hurt? What? Like, what? And I was like, and, you know, like my cycle's heavy. And she's like, and that was the first time I realized, I was like, wait, this doesn't happen to you too, you know? And then I was like, a little bit like, okay, that's interesting. And then high school graduation, I was at a graduation party. And of course, I had started my period and I was in a ton of like so bad pain, like I was sweating and passing out. And I was laying in my friend's like front room, and everybody's walking into this party, like walking by this room. And I just remember all of them being like, oh my gosh, like I've never seen anyone so sick. Are you okay? And so those were two like scenarios where I realized, okay, like they're all looking at me like, wow, are you okay? And I'm like, so this must not be happening to them because they didn't understand. Yeah. And so at that point I was like, something's off here, but I didn't really look into it.
Is that kind of like, what was the moment that prompted you to like really go and maybe like see an OB or go see a medical professional for your symptoms?
So I saw an OB and told her that I had painful periods. And she also normalized it and said, this is normal. You're just one of those people that has that. And so again, I just in high school, just, okay, it's normal. But as I got a little bit older, into my young 20s, I started having a lot of stomach problems. And of course I didn't correlate it because I had no idea what was going on. And so I thought I had like an ulcer, or I was really stressed at work and I was working a lot. And I was like, maybe I have an ulcer. I don't know what's going on. And then one day at work, I passed out, and it was like the day before my cycle was going to start. And at that time, I didn't correlate anything. I thought, oh, I've just been stressed, or I didn't drink enough water. Like I always had an excuse as to why things were the way they were. And at that point, like my stomach was bothering me so much that I was literally just eating saltines and broth. And so I was like, okay, I need to go see a doctor. I never thought about an OB. I always thought like, this is a stomach issue, because it was starting to be on a daily occurrence. It wasn't just around my cycle. But around my cycle, I would be constipated or have diarrhea. Again, thought it was normal. I thought it was just a part of the process. So when I was 20, I think I was 24, I was 24. And I went to a GI doctor, and they just ordered every GI test under the sun. So upper GI, lower GI, this type of scan, this type of, drink the barium, drink this, drink, you know, all of them. I had them all done. And at that time, like it was getting worse. And I was 24, and like all my friends were like going out to the bars and having fun. And I was laying in bed, and I knew at that point, I knew something was wrong. I was like, this isn't normal. Everyone's going out, everyone's having fun. And it's Friday night at 9:00, and I'm laying here so sick. So I really thought I had an ulcer or something. So of course they came back and said, you have IBS. And I was like, I was frustrated even just hearing it, because my gut knew that, my gut knew that was not what was wrong with me. I knew it. I had no idea how I knew, but I knew. And so this is earlier in the 2000s. So for you youngsters, Google was not what Google is today. It was not as robust, but I did start just typing in like IBS misdiagnosis, and just started doing some research. And I remember, I think I cried when I got that, because I just knew it wasn't right. And I think the next day I was like still searching, and I found an article, and I really wish I knew where it was or what it was. Because again, at that time, I had no idea what I was about to get into. That said something along the lines of like 80%, and this, don't quote me on this, like 80% of women that are diagnosed with IBS have endometriosis. And I was like, couldn't even say it, let alone know what it was. And, you know, back in the day, there used to be bookstores on every corner. And so Google wasn't what it was. So I went to the bookstore, you know, I didn't even go to the library. I just went to the bookstore and was like, went to the medical section and just looked for that word. Like I had it written down. I was like, found one book on a bottom shelf. And I just remember I was sitting in Borders and I opened it up and it listed all of the symptoms. And I just started crying. I was just like, oh my gosh, I know what's wrong with me. I was happy. I was so happy. So I basically self-diagnosed myself between Google and a book in Borders. And I don't even remember what the book was. I wish, you know, if I could go back, I wish I recorded all of this so I would remember. And I immediately called my OBGYN, whom I loved, and said, I think I have this endometriosis. I need an appointment. You know, get me in. And so I came in and I went into the appointment. I was like having all these stomach issues and this and that. And the pain every month is getting worse. And she was like, okay, let's do an ultrasound. And so for the people who are listening that maybe you've never had an ultrasound, there's two types that you see. There's one that you see in the movies when people are pregnant and they're rubbing it over your tummy and they're looking for the baby in there. That is one part of it. But then there's another part that's a little bit more uncomfortable where they actually look inside. And when they look in there, they're looking at your uterus and your ovaries and just, you know, everything inside. And I had never experienced that before. I had no idea what I was getting into, but they found a very large ovarian cyst at that ultrasound. So when I went back to the office, she's like, you do have a cyst. I think we should do an exploratory surgery. And at this point, endometriosis is still not mentioned, not talked about, but the cyst was pretty large. So it was worthy of going in. So that's how that kind of started. And so I scheduled the surgery. I was extremely nervous. I was 24 and never had a major surgery in my life, let alone, you know, anything like that. And so I scheduled it. I had this, that morning of the surgery, I really was a nervous wreck. And my doctor came in and I really loved her. I saw her for so many years. And she was like, my mother passed away last week. And she seemed very shaken up. And I was just like, we don't need to do this. I'm out. But she's like, no, I'm fine. It's okay. Let's do this. And so we did. And when I woke up, she said, I've never seen this, quote unquote, I've never seen anything that bad in my life. I did the best I could. You have endometriosis. And that was it. And I was like, what? No clue what it meant. No explanation of what the disease was. Here's birth control, go on it continuously. It will help. You will no longer have a cycle and it'll calm things down. So I did it. I said, okay, you know, and I did it. And it did help me feel better for a few months, but the side effects of the birth control were awful. Like I was sad. I would like see a cat sitting on a porch. I tell the story all the time because it really happened. I was driving to work and there was a cat outside. And I was like, it's cold out. And I was like crying. I'm like, I'm crying about a cat sitting on a porch. Like, what is going on? So we kept switching them and I never felt right on it. And my pain was still there. It was not as bad, but it was still there. And I wasn't even having a cycle. So I knew things were still not right. So I just started doing some crazy research. I found a chat board. So back in the day, there used to be chat boards before Facebook. I think Facebook was around, but I was out of college, so I didn't have access to it. And I found a chat board all about endometriosis, and it taught me so much that I had no idea. And it was just other people that were on there that were going through what I was going through. And it was Nancy's Nook. So I'm sure people have heard that before. If you experience endo, now it's huge on Facebook because, you know, it's like a Facebook group. But before Facebook, it was like a chat board. And I had met another woman who was from Michigan who was going through very similar things as me. And she was like, you need to try and get this excision surgery, which I didn't know what that meant. She's like, but there's no one in Michigan who does that. And I was like, okay. And at that time, there was probably, I don't know, less than 10 doctors that did this type of surgery in the US. I'm not sure globally, I'm sure it was even smaller. So I was like, I'm sick. I need to go see this doctor, and you should write up your story. And I did, and all your medical records. And I did all of that and send it. And meanwhile, while this is going on, I decided to stop taking the birth control because it's not working. The side effects are not great. I'm still in pain. And I just start to get just sicker. But some of the things that I learned on that chat board, which I immediately put into play, was no caffeine, no gluten, which was brutal, but I did it. Like, so that was in, I have my notes over here. That was in 2005. I gave up gluten and coffee, which was hard, but it helped. It really did help me feel better. I drink decaf coffee now, but still delicious. It doesn't,
not the same.
not the same. At this point, I don't even remember what it's like to have caffeine, but that helped. And then I was just waiting for this doctor to reply, and they said, they finally did. We think you're a candidate. And I just remember being very excited about it. But then the next challenge was figuring out I had to travel out of state. How do I get there? How do I pay for this? My insurance isn't going to cover it. You know, it's very, very stressful to have this disease. And the elephant in the room that's not talked about often is the financial aspect of how much it costs to even get the treatment that you need. And a lot of people don't have access to that. So I was just saving every dime I had so I could do this trip. And I did that. And I had to set up a payment plan with them, which took me like almost 7 years to pay. I mean, it's expensive. Yeah, it's very expensive. So I'm so grateful that I was able to figure out how to get this surgery that I needed in a different state. And so I did, and I went and I got excision surgery, which is different than the surgery I had, my first surgery, which was really more exploratory, but she did something called ablation. So there's two types of surgeries. I'm sure it's been talked about before on these webinars. So that is what I felt that I really, really needed. And so had surgery. They took my appendix. They found a ton of endometriosis. At that point, I was diagnosed as stage 4. And I was 25 at this point. And I thought, this is it, like, all done. I'm cured. Everything's great. It's all gone. They took my appendix. And when I got home, I ended up having a reaction to something. At first, they thought I had an infection or whatever. But by the time I flew home, I was covered in, like, I had hives on the back of my legs. It was really weird. And I was recovering. So I was moving really slow. And I called and, oh, it's probably just a reaction to the medication. Stop taking this, whatever. End up going to the ER. They're like, oh, we think it's a UTI. I mean, it's just ridiculous that anyone even thought that based on having hives. Long story short, by the next day, my whole entire body was covered. I couldn't move. My hands were swollen. Like, I was having a full reaction. Years later, I found out they used a sealant that sometimes they seal you so you don't get scar tissue. And I had a reaction to that. And luckily I found my family doctor here in Michigan where I live, put me on steroids. So then my recovery was so much harder because I had this terrible reaction. And so then I was on steroids for a month, which was a whole nother interesting experience. But after that, you know, I really thought I was going to feel better. And about a year later, I started feeling just really sick again. So the doctor, you know, that I saw ordered another ultrasound, and I had another cyst, but this time it was 10 centimeters, which is huge. It's like a tennis ball, and your ovary is the size, and it's inside, and your ovary is the size of a walnut, I believe. So like, it explained why I was in so much pain. And I was just like, at that point, when you're already gone through all of this, now it's a year later and you're not feeling well again, you're like, what is going on? So we decided to just watch it, even though it was very large, and that's kind of dangerous. But we watched and waited. It would go up and down. And then finally in 2007, my local doctor here was like, we have to get that cyst out. It's just not going to go away. And it's a risk. So I scheduled a surgery here just with a local doctor. And when the doctor got in, he didn't do anything, nothing. He opened me up for surgery and literally sealed me back up. And he went out and talked to my boyfriend at the time, who's now my husband, and said, it's a mess in there. There's nothing I can do. So I had a pointless surgery in 2007 after, 1 year after. And I was just like, oh my gosh. And at this point, I was just so in it. So like, I was just so in it that I was just pushing, what do I need to do next? I couldn't even think. It was just like, what do I need to do next? I don't know how I maintained a full-time employment. I somehow did that. I don't know how, but I kept my job. I did my best. Sometimes I would be like laying on the floor at work. I mean, it was just, I just pushed through. So I could go on and on. Basically, I had to have another surgery. I went back down to the doctor that I had surgery, and they think that reaction that I had just caused a ton more scar tissue, just causing me a bunch more pain.
It's everything else.
Yeah. So it's basically just like having endo all over again.
Yeah.
So had another surgery. Things were really good after that for a while, but I just kept getting cysts. They would rupture, and then they would, I'd be in pain. They would come, they would go over the next several years. And then finally, about 2 years later, I had another. I just kept growing these cysts. It was so frustrating. But I felt better. I still struggled with my cycles, but in 2009, I had another very, very large cyst on my left ovary. I saw a different local doctor here who was definitely more experienced, but still didn't really know what endo was. Performed a surgery to remove it and ended up removing my left ovarian tube because he said they were so damaged from the cyst just coming and going and rupturing. And so when a cyst ruptures, you feel awful for like a week. And that was happening to me like every couple months. So I was kind of happy that happened. Hindsight looking back, I probably didn't need to lose that organ. But I didn't know better. And the doctor at the time didn't know any better. So after that, I was good for I was pretty good. I mean, still painful periods during the months, but not sick every day. I mean, it was to the point where I was so sick every day, I was hardly functioning. So after that surgery, things were okay. I still had rough months. And then in 2017, I started to feel a little sick, but I ignored it because as someone with chronic illness, if people are listening that have chronic illness, you probably understand there's a little bit of denial. And I definitely had that. And I just didn't want to acknowledge it. And I was like, I'm fine. I just go on with my life. I'm fine. In early 2018, there were several times I had to just go get an IV because I was so dehydrated and in so much pain during my cycle. I couldn't function. I knew something was kind of funky, but I kind of ignored it. And there is potential for reoccurrence with this disease. And I'm sure that's what was going on with me. But at that time, I really ignored it. And then I was very nauseous, ignored it, just nauseous, not eating that much, losing weight, still ignoring. And then I was working with a strength coach to build up muscle. And he was like, do me a favor, because I would have to tell him what I would eat. And he's like, I want you to record for 30 days, the days that you're nauseous. He's like, just take a calendar, make a little circle. At the end of the month, I realized I was nauseous 70% of the month. And I was like, okay, something is wrong and I need to deal with this. So I called my former doctor and was like, this is what's going on. I think let's have a phone consultation and we'll talk. And so we did. And he suggested at that point, he said, I think, we should do a hysterectomy. And just for everybody listening, a hysterectomy is not a cure for endometriosis. He said, but I think you have adenomyosis and, it might just be time. I wasn't ready for that. So I was just like, okay, scheduled the appointment, canceled it. And serendipitously, I was scrolling through Instagram one day and I saw that the Endometriosis Foundation of America was hosting a patient day. And I have a little support group here in Michigan that I run, or I used to. I'm not doing it anymore, or I would, but it's just not very active.
Yeah.
And I was like, I should go to this and just get information that I can bring back and help. And there'll be other people in the community there. This is great. So I went. And I was so grateful that I went. I didn't know anybody there. I'm kind of shy, even though it doesn't seem like it because I'm just blabbing away right now. But I didn't talk to anyone. I just took a bunch of notes and was sending them back to the group here. And at the end, I went up to just meet the doctor who was helping to put it on. And I was like, can we take a selfie so I can post it, on Instagram and be like, I was here. I'm so cool. And he was like, well, are you press? And I was like, no. He's like, well, are you a patient? And I was like, not of yours. And he's like, well, how do you feel? I was like, but I am a patient. He said, well, how do you feel? And I was like, honestly, I haven't been feeling so good lately. And he said, come back and see me. Just you come back and see me. And I was coming back to New York in May for work. And I was like, you know what? I'll tag on an extra day. It can't hurt to just talk to somebody else. I had never crossed my mind. So I went back, had an MRI. Endometriosis was showing on the MRI. That was in May of 2018. And we said, okay, let's do a surgery. We got to do another one, as much as I really, really didn't want to. And so I was like, okay, let's do it. Like, I don't feel well, nauseous 70% of the time. It's probably a cyst. Like, we just, it's a cyst. So I pushed it till August because I was really busy at work. And I was like, August is a better time for me at work. So as that summer went on, I was eating less and less and just down to smoothies. But again, I'm fine, just not that hungry. Had that surgery in 2018, and I actually had almost a full bowel obstruction from endometriosis, which could have killed me. My bowel was completely wrapped in disease. And when they came out to talk to my husband, they said that my bowel looked like a balloon animal. And they were surprised that I was able to function on a daily basis, let alone put any type of food in my body. And that it didn't rupture. It could have ruptured and I would have died. And so that was a really tough time. I was in the hospital for 7 days when I planned to be there overnight, 2 nights maybe. And it was a really long recovery. They found 40 lesions of endo, which is a good amount considering I had already had so many surgeries. And then the bowel obstruction was really tough. They had to remove about a foot of my bowel.
Wow, that's a pretty big resection there.
Yeah. And I didn't understand how serious, again, I don't know if I just live in this denial, but when you're going through it, you really don't understand the severity of it. But all the residents kept coming into my room and like talking. And I was just like, why are all the residents coming in here? Later, when they had to call in like an emergency bowel specialist, because again, nothing showed up on my MRI, no awareness. Nobody talks about, this is why I get so passionate. Nobody talks about how this can affect your bowel or your lung or your liver. I mean, it really can. It can affect other organs that could seriously harm you. I had no idea that could happen. And that's why I was always feeling so nauseous. So when I went and saw the doctor that like emergency came in to help with the bowel, he was like, we see a case like this maybe once every 3 to 6 years. And I was like, oh, he's like, yeah, this was serious. And I had no idea how serious it was. So that recovery was tough. Very tough, very hard time eating afterwards and kind of retraining my body. I still struggle with certain foods. So that was a big eye opener. And I think at that point I realized like, this is really chronic and I'm going to start speaking out more. And I was kind of shy about speaking out. And I just started talking on social media and I started telling my story and more people were coming out and saying, my daughter looks like that. Sometimes once a month, can she talk to you? And I said, of course, or I don't feel good, or this, or my wife, like it just out of the woodwork, people were coming and saying, what is this disease? And I had to keep sharing and keep going. And so I did. And that's when I decided to start the podcast. So I have a podcast called The Cycle where people can come share their endo stories. And I try to get other people to come on too. But because the disease affects everybody so differently, I think everybody's story, if they want to share, needs to be heard because you may relate to what this person's going through where, oh, I have this diaphragmatic pain, but I had bowel pain. I mean, it's just so different. So to just quickly wrap up, that was 2018, 2019, I was feeling a little bit better, but I still wasn't right. And by the end of 2019, I was having a hard time standing all day. I was having a hard time walking. I was having sciatica. I was having a lot of nerve pain. I was like, is this recovery from the surgery? I just didn't know. It was tough. So in 2020, I had another surgery. And I did, at that point, we determined that I still had adenomyosis, which is endometriosis in the uterus. And I had made the decision, I have to have this hysterectomy because I can't walk. And so I finally did it. And it's really helped. I feel a lot better. Again, it's not a cure for endometriosis. If you don't get the endo out and you have a hysterectomy, it doesn't help because the disease is still there. But for me, that was just pressing on nerves, and my uterus is really swollen. So I made that decision, and I have one ovary left, and that's pretty much all I have left down there, because everything else has been so diseased. So I'm feeling a lot better, but I still have ups and downs, and I still have days where I struggle and nerve pain and nausea. But I'm very, very grateful for the access to care that I've had, and to all of the doctors and friends and family and support, because it's been an incredibly difficult journey. So that's kind of the quick nutshell.
Well, no, thank you for sharing. I mean, yeah, no, exactly how you mentioned that everyone has different struggles and everyone has different symptoms and everyone relates to everyone differently. So remember, that's why it's so important with a diagnosis like endo, where there's so many different variances of how it displays itself in someone.
Yes.
We do share our story, or that people share their story, so that way, your story can impact someone multiple, years down the road, even if they stumble upon one of your podcasts or one of our videos or one of your videos, things like that.
That's the hope.
And then exactly like you mentioned, I think people don't think of endo as being systemic. I think people think of endo as just being a reproductive issue, a women's health issue. But if you really take at it and you kind of look at it not so myopically, and you kind of look at it in a larger scheme of things, it's not only systemic in the sense of, like, as you mentioned, it can affect your liver, your bowel, everything, but also I think holistically it affects your life mentally, emotionally, things like that. I mean, how was that for you? Like, I know you said you still kind of struggle with acceptance of having a chronic illness. How has that journey been for you? Is it still sort of an ongoing battle, or have you gotten to a point in your life where you're able to sort of be okay? Not okay in the sense of like, I'm totally cool with it, but like okay with like, okay, I'm in a good place.
That's a really interesting question. And I think one of my just strategies in life, I happen to be kind of a positive person. So for me, it was just like, what do I fight next? What do I fight next? And it was just like, what brick do I need to remove now? And I just go. But at some point you have to just stop and breathe and accept it. And I think over 2019 to today, I've done a lot more of that, just accepting and being kind to myself. Because one of the other things is I would never be like mad at my body, but I would just be upset that I couldn't maybe do the same things as everybody else, or I couldn't. And it just, I'm a hard worker just naturally in life, at work or in the gym or in any way. Like I just want to always be achieving. And I felt like this held me back. And now the way that I reflect on it is it's taught me incredible things. It's brought incredible people into my life. And I kind of accept still. I don't think I'm 100% there, but that this is chronic, and it's something that I have to live with every single day. But slowing down and actually breathing in, like stopping over the past couple of years has really helped me reflect on it and see all of the positive things that it's brought into my life, because it has. And I know people are listening might be like, that sounds so crazy, but it's not, because it's brought the most beautiful humans into my life. I love the podcast. I love meeting people, but it's also made me a better leader at work and a more empathetic person in general. Like in a way of even just someone's having a bad day, I know what it's like to be the type of person who's just got a phone call of a diagnosis or another cyst or something, and I'm about to get on a plane for work, and I'm sitting in my seat and tears are streaming down my eyes. And, I see people that might be like that on planes now, and all I want to do is just hold their hand. It's made me a person who wants to just empathize, because we never know what's going on behind closed doors, regardless of illness or not. And I think in that way, Endo's made me a better person.
And I think that's a really interesting paradigm. I don't think people really think about sometimes the positive that these negative outcomes or negative things in our life sort of bring. I think in life there is that duality. So with everything there is that sort of duality of positivity and sort of negativity. So I think that's really interesting how you highlighted that.
Well, and I mean, you asked, like, honestly, I put together an outline for today,
Yeah.
right? Even though I know it and it's just a lot. And so I don't want to
Yeah.
forget things. And even putting that together, I felt sadness. I really, it still feels a little bit heavy to me. Because it's been a very long and hard journey. And it's still difficult. It really is, but I have to look at it in the way of how can I pay this suffering forward so others don't have to suffer, right? If I didn't do that, then I don't know if I could have gotten through all of this. That's the honest truth. That's why I tell my story. That's why I do what I do. That's why I do the podcast, because otherwise my suffering makes no sense to me.
Have there been things that you've done sort of in your life, or maybe things that you've picked up from other individuals that you've heard their stories from, that have sort of helped you with symptom management or anything like that? Like, I know sometimes the big one obviously is diet. That's the one that I hear all the time. And my background's actually in nutrition. So that's where my biggest passion lies, but that can always be really tricky and a kind of controversial topic with everyone. But how has that looked for you? How has sort of your dietary changes looked for you?
Yeah.
Give the
So
disclaimer that that it's diet is something that's very individualistic.
yes.
So
And I think everybody has to figure out what works for them and what doesn't work for them. I always encourage people, and I'm sure Jess said this when she was on too, do a food diary, because gluten may not bother you. I don't know, but it definitely bothers me and I don't do well with it. And I did see, I really was struggling with, like, I didn't know what was bothering me food wise. I kept a food diary. I saw what was bothering me. It still kind of happens now for no reason. Like, there'll be a food that just kind of triggers me not to feel well. But I've added a natural doctor into my fold, right? When you have a chronic illness, if you can afford it, and my natural doctor is great. They're very, very affordable. Thank goodness. Adding that in, like, got blood work done, found out that I also had Hashimoto's. And then, so that, again, not diet related, but then I also found out I was allergic to casein, which is in dairy. So then I cut out dairy, right? So not eating inflammatory foods has helped me incredibly a lot. And I will say, like, I love a glass of wine. I love a cocktail. They don't love me, because I can still have, like, maybe a glass of wine a week, maybe two from getting crazy.
Yeah.
But something with that, the inflammation, it will set me right into a flare. So I do think that it's directly correlated, but I've changed my diet. I try to eat healthy. It doesn't mean, I never cheat on dairy and gluten ever, but it doesn't mean that I'm not going to get a dairy-free, gluten-free cupcake, which, like, my aunt did get me one and I ate it today. Like, I already ate it with my coffee this morning. Like, I'm not going to fully restrict my life, but I am going to be very cautious. And on the same side, not to even just demonize gluten. Guess what? Beans do not work with this body. Like, it does not like beans. So I don't do peanut butter. I don't do legumes because they don't like me. Now, other people can eat them and they're totally fine. So diet definitely shifting, adding supplements. So again, working with my natural doctor, but adding things like magnesium and B12 and zinc and vitamin D and vitamin C have really helped me too. Like, just my energy's better and I feel better, and I don't think I was absorbing, especially with all the bowel stuff, I don't think I was absorbing nutrients properly. So that's really helped, but also meditating, working out, like strength training, I was used to do crazy cardio. I had no idea that it was, like, making me so inflamed. It was probably making me feel worse. So I like to strength train at not a crazy heart rate pace, and foam rolling. And I really love, I take one once a week, maybe twice, but I take baths. Hopefully, if you have a bathtub, if you're listening, and I always put Epsom salt in it, like a ton of Epsom salt. And it really helps me feel better anytime I'm having pain. That's like my first go-to.
Are there maybe some tips with foam rolling, or maybe just movement in general, that you have? Because I feel like people with chronic illness, and endo in particular, you go on the internet, right? And you're like trying to alleviate your symptoms, and it says like exercise, great for endo. But then you hear the word exercise, and even for me, in my mind, that connotates
Yes.
marathon runners and like
Right.
there's and I can't imagine that even being feasible. So like how do you sort of incorporate movement? I like to say the word movement.
Yes.
Like,
Movement. Yes.
yeah.
And it depends on how you feel. If I'm having a bad day, I'm staying on the couch with my heating pad. I'm not gonna be like, oh, I'm having a bad day, I'm just gonna go run to the gym. It's not happening. See how you feel. On the days you feel good, try walking around your house. Walk the perimeter of your home, like outside if it's not bad weather, and try that. And then the next day, try to do 2 laps doing that. Walk around the block once you start to feel more comfortable. But it doesn't have, I agree with you, it can be simple movement. I love to just walk. Like, I just like to go for a walk. And when I was really in pain, there were times where I almost had to call my husband to come pick me up because I couldn't keep going. So maybe stay close and slowly work your way out. I do like to strength train with weights. You can look up, YouTube has so many different things, but start with 2-pound weights or soup cans, just slow movements. And if you don't feel up for it, walking is great. And then for the foam roller, there are a bunch of great videos online, but Jess also has them in her book. So Jessica Murnane, whenever I say Jess, I loved her book, by the way, and I found it to be very, very helpful if anyone's looking for a resource for like food and diet and recipes and foam rolling. I feel like she really covers it. But I just got a foam roller off Amazon, and I just roll. I will sit and roll on the parts that hurt. And sometimes I'll just sit there and it kind of hurts, but it almost releases the pain. So I foam roll every single day. And then I also do, if I'm not feeling great, general mobility moves, which you can look up, which when I say mobility could just be even just like rolling your shoulders back, rolling your shoulders forward. So simple movements. You could sit in a chair. And I also really like yoga, but restorative yoga, not crazy vinyasa, which you can do, and no judgment. If that feels good to you, you should do that. But I really like slow movements where you're almost laying and just moving your body around. Has been very helpful for me mentally and physically. And then meditation has really changed my life. Learning how to breathe properly and relax my body has really made a difference, because I tend to be type A and I get stressed, and I feel it in my, but none of that's going to take away the pain. These are just things that are going to help maybe reduce it a little bit.
And I feel like that's always the disclaimer, right? Like, these are
Yeah.
sort of interventions that people can do that are going to help alleviate, but never really sort of remediate.
Yes. Yeah, exactly.
And then with like meditation as well, I think that really does help us sort of get in touch with our body. I think, like, especially with people that have chronic illness, whether that be endo, whether that be PCOS or PMDS, whatever that looks like for anyone, sometimes we ignore our pain because we do normalize it. We do sort of just live with it. But I think meditation and breathing techniques can help us connect our body and sort of be like, you know what? I'm not okay today. Let's take it easy. Yeah.
And that's okay
like,
too.
And ourselves. Yeah.
I have a friend in Ireland who we met because of endo. She was on the podcast and I adore her. But she says, when you wake up in the morning, and I love this, say, what do I need today? Just ask yourself and give that to yourself. It's okay. If you say, I need to lay in bed today, I need to take the day off work, I need a mental health day, I need to not go for a walk, do that. Or I need to go for a walk, I need to eat some more greens today. Just ask yourself, what do you need? And take care of yourself.
Yeah, it's definitely the most important thing, is taking care of ourselves.
Yeah.
And I think before we like wrap up here, it is going to be holiday season. So we are going to be coming into like Thanksgiving and Christmas and Halloween. Do you have any tips about navigating holidays? Because not holidays, you're surrounded by family, which can sometimes be a lot emotionally, as well as you're surrounded by all different types of foods. And just there's a lot going on that can sort of lead someone with endo or any chronic illness to sort of withdraw themselves or maybe be a little bit more closed off, which is okay. But do you have any tips for people to be able to sort of navigate this season?
Yes, I have a lot actually, but I'll just give the top. It's okay to say no. First off, you don't have to go anywhere. You can stay home if you want. If you don't feel good and you don't want to go, I always like to drive separately if that's an opportunity for you, or if you're staying in a hotel or you're traveling. Make sure there's taxis or Ubers if you need to leave early so you can leave. Come prepared with maybe your own food. I know that that's tough, but if they don't have, or to check in with the person who's making the food, if they don't have something that supports, what you're eating at that time, bring your own. I'm infamous for showing up with like store-bought sushi everywhere I go because I just don't know what's going to have dairy and gluten in it. I come prepared, and bring yourself a little dessert that you can eat so you can indulge as well. And I know, with alcohol, it affects everybody differently, but I bring like a Zevia. So if you guys don't know what those are like, it's like a soda, but it has no sugar in it. And that's like my special drink, or make a mocktail to bring yourself, and then maybe, indulge in whatever you want, but bring water, be prepared. It is basically my best advice. Be prepared. It's okay to say no. And if people give you a hard time, which unfortunately people with chronic illness get a hard time all the time. What's wrong with you? You're always sick, blah, blah, blah. Hold your ground and say, I appreciate that you feel that way, but you don't know what it's like to have X, endo, PCOS, MS. You don't know what it's like. I appreciate that, but I'm actually not feeling well. And I really appreciate if you would understand. And if they still don't understand, then maybe you send them some articles or resources that they can understand. And if you don't want to talk about endo, because since I've come out and been all over social media, I run into strangers all the time, and it's hard. Oh my gosh, are you okay? People are going to talk to you and treat you like that. And you just have to say, I'm great. Thanks for asking. Or if you want to talk about it, then you talk about it. Or what is endo? If you don't want to talk about it, be like, you can Google it and find out.
Yeah, I'll just text you some resources. There you go.
Yeah, 100%.
Well, thank you so much for doing this, for taking an hour out of your day to share your story, share what you've gone through, sharing your experience with us here. So thank you. And for those people that are going to be watching this on YouTube, I'll go ahead and leave the handles to where you can find Melissa on social media, her website. She also has a really good protein bar, which I've been trying to get, but the flavor I want is sold out. And you just stay busy, right? You do a podcast, you have your job, and then you also run your own business for a protein bar. Like, it's a lot.
Busy. I'm very busy. Busy girl. Yeah, but I appreciate it. Thank you so much for having me on. If anyone has any questions, please feel free to reach out. And yeah, the podcast I think is great. If anyone wants to be on it and tell their story, please reach out. I'd be happy to have you on.
Yeah, so I'll leave all that stuff in the description. So I'll leave where they can find your podcast. I'll link to your website, your social media handles, and everything like that. So if people want to connect and talk to you personally, they'll be able to go ahead and do that. Thank you so much for your time.
And thank you for bringing awareness to this much needed topic and conversation.
All right. You enjoy the rest of your day and have a nice holiday season.
You as well. Bye. Bye.